All right, good afternoon, everyone. First, I just want to make sure that everyone can hear me. Just pop it in the chat if you can. Okay, perfect. And can everyone see the slide that says seed saving? All right, great. So we're going to go ahead and get started. So my name is Dania Chisholm. I am the horticultural program assistant in the Clayton County Extension Office. And we're going to talk about seed saving today. So to get started, I do just want to see how many of the people we have here have saved seeds before. Okay. So it's looking like we have a good number of people that have saved their own seeds. So we're gonna move on and then maybe we can have some discussion at the end. So if someone has a little bit more expertise than I do on a certain subject, they'll be able to share that. But we're gonna go ahead and get started. Okay, so to begin with, what is a seed? So seed is the organ that forms after fertilization occurs. So what we consider fruits and even what we call vegetables, but would be considered fruits, are basically the ovary that surrounds those seeds. And if there's no seed to surround, then the fruit doesn't build up around that area. So that's kind of what happened to this corn. Can everyone see me?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
perfect. So this corn, every single strand of corn silk is connected to a kernel or a possible kernel. So pollen needs to fall on every single strand of silk in order for every single kernel to form. And this corn just didn't get pollinated correctly. So the cob didn't form. I know you may have been growing, often you see it with cucumbers. So the top of the cucumber will be really big and maybe the bottom will be really tiny. Those seeds just didn't get pollinated. So it was incomplete pollination. If we look at the parts of a flower, I know this is taking us back to our biology classes. But flowers are basically the sexual organs of a plant surrounded by sepals and petals, right? So the female parts of the flower include the stigma, which is where the pollen needs to get to, the style, and the ovary. The male parts of the flower include the anther, which is where the pollen is, and the filaments, which all together make up the stamen. So you may see, when you look at squash flowers, you may see that the ovary is actually below the flower. So that ovary is what looks like a tiny, tiny little squash. And so when the pollen gets on the stigma, it travels down and pollinates all those seeds, so the squash actually grows around the seeds that it needs to protect. With flowers, there are different types of flowers. What's pictured here is a perfect flower. A perfect flower means it has both the male and the female parts. An imperfect flower would be a flower that only has stamens, so it only has the pollen, or a flower that only has the female part, so it only has the stigma and the ovaries. So some plants only have, some plants will produce plants that only have male flowers or only have female flowers. Those are going to be monoecious plants. For example, spinach. So if you were trying to save seeds from spinach, you would need to grow out a lot because you're not going to be sure whether it's going to be a female spinach plant or a male spinach plant until they actually start flowering, and you need both. Some plants are dioecious, so they have both male and female flowers on the plant. Go back to the previous example, squash. So squash has male and female flowers, and we'll see some pictures of those later on. So now that we know what a seed is, what can you save seed from? And the easiest answer is anything that produces seed, you can save seed from. But I guess the answer that we want would be to the question, what do you want to save seed from? So there are some considerations when it comes to what you want to save seed from, and when it comes to saving seed. So we'll move on into those, but basically it's what type of plant it is. Is it a hybrid? Is it an heirloom? Is it open pollinated? And then so I'll skip on to the types of seeds, right? So open pollinated is a phrase that has gained popularity. It really just means that the seed is going to produce a plant that closely resembles the parent. It's open pollinated means it just, you didn't control the pollination, you didn't go in and hand pollinate it yourself. The seed that grows is going to be the seed that will produce a plant that's like the parent. Heirloom is basically an open pollinated variety, but there's different definitions for heirloom. So sometimes it's just a really old plant. I know here it says about 50 years old, but when you're looking at seed packages, there's no definition or industry standard for what you would call an heirloom. So, don't let seeing heirloom on it make you want to spend more money. It's just up to whether you actually like the variety. But it's generally an older variety. It used to be one that maybe you couldn't get from seed sellers anymore. Maybe they took it out their catalogs, but now heirlooms are pretty popular, so they're selling them. When it comes to hybrids, sometimes there's a little confusion about what a hybrid plant is. So hybrids is basically the result of a cross. So say you like this yellow tomato and you also like this red tomato, and you want to cross them to see if you can get an orange tomato that tastes just as good. If you get a cross that you really like, then that first plant that you got, that first generation, is an F1 hybrid. It's genetically distinct from the parent populations. And if you save seed from a hybrid, there's no guarantee that it will be the same as that F1 hybrid because it's still working out the genetic differences. It's kind of like my mother and my father made me. If I have a child, it's not going to be the exact same as me, right? Well, there's also some other things going on in there, but I can't produce an exact replica of myself because of all the genetics that have gone into me. So it's kind of what is going on with hybrids. Now, if a hybrid, if someone really, really likes the result of a hybrid, they can work to stabilize that seed, stabilize that plant. That takes some time and some effort. So you won't really see many home gardeners doing that, but some stabilized hybrids turn into heirlooms. So it's just whether or not you can get the plant to reliably produce seeds that's going to be exactly like the parent plant. Now, GMOs are a little tricky. You might notice a lot of seed packages putting non-GMO on their packets. The good thing is that even if it doesn't have it, you as a consumer are not able to buy genetically modified seeds. So when I say genetically modified, I'm not talking about selective breeding or crossbreeding. I'm talking about seeds where someone has actually gone in and taken the genes from something else and put it into genetics of that seed. Usually that's done to help plants withstand the effects of pesticides. So if you have some corn, but you're having a problem with weeds in the corn, you want to spray pesticides, but you don't want to kill the corn. So that's when the genetic modification comes in. Now, just to go back to some more considerations, when you're looking to save seed, there's some planning that goes into it in the beginning. So when I say in the beginning, we talked about the types of seeds. So you want to know which plants to get, where you're going to plant your plants. When you're considering which plants to get and whether you want to save seed from them, you have to consider how that seed is pollinated. Will it cross-pollinate with other plants, or is it a self-pollinating variety? And if it does cross-pollinate, then you'll need to consider how far away it needs to be from other types if you only want that type. You don't want a mix or a hybrid. You also need to think about when can you harvest the seeds. So some seeds like tomatoes, when you harvest the tomato to eat, that's the same time that you would harvest the fruit to save its seed. Other plants like cucumbers, eggplant, when you eat those, the seeds aren't mature yet. So you would have to leave that on the plant longer than when you would harvest it to eat in order to get viable seeds. You also want to take into account what type of plant it is. So there are different types of plants. There are annuals, perennials, biennials. So an annual is going to be a plant that grows and flowers in the same year, the same season. Biennials, they take the first year to grow. So they'll grow their leaves and then they'll flower in the next year. An example of an annual would be lettuce or tomatoes, peppers. Tomatoes and peppers technically are perennials, but in our climate, they're annuals because they don't survive the cold weather. An example of a biennial would be collards and kale. So they grow their leaves, you leave them in the ground, if anyone's ever left them in the ground, and you'll see some flowers the next year. And then perennials, they usually don't flower the first year. They take that first year to grow, and then they'll flower maybe in the second year and the third year is when they really take off. An example of a perennial would be asparagus. It really needs to invest some time in its root growth and its plant growth. So just to put all those considerations into the same place, the Seed Savers Exchange has a seed saving guide that is really helpful when you're deciding how to plant your garden and whether you even want to save seeds. So it will have the list of crops at the top. It'll give you the species name, the family. It'll tell you the life cycle. So whether it's an annual, a perennial, biennial, it's pollination methods. So whether it's self-pollinated, insect-pollinated, and wind-pollinated. So self-pollinated, the pollination really goes again into isolation distance or how far away it needs to be from other types. So self-pollinated varieties don't have to be as far away as things that are insect pollinated, and things that are wind pollinated need to be the farthest away. So we can take a look and see that the azuki beans are self-pollinated, so they only need to be about 10 to 20 feet away. But things like amaranth are wind pollinated, so the highest point of that range is 1,300 feet. Corn is also wind pollinated, and that has to be pretty far away too. I think it's about 2 miles if I'm correct. Let's see. Oh, well, it says here listed 800 feet to a half a mile. So it's the isolation distance really also you want to take into account what your neighbors are growing and if you have any food producers around you. So if your neighbors are growing corn, you might be a little out of luck about saving seed that's exactly like the corn seed that you first bought. Um, let's see. It also is going to tell you the population size that you need, and this is for genetics. So in order to have viable seeds for carrots, you only need 5 plants. But if you want to make sure that you're not causing a lot of inbreeding, then you may want to have a little bit more of that. So for variety maintenance, they're suggesting 20 to 50. And then for genetic preservation, it's about 80 plus. Now, I know a lot of us as home growers don't have the space that we need to dedicate to the genetic preservation number. So a way around that is to maybe you can seed from 5 carrots. You're willing to kind of dedicate 5 carrots worth of space in your garden that's not going to give you any food. Maybe after some time of saving seed, you introduce some seed that you buy into that mix so that you're getting some new genetics or some varying genetics in there, just so you don't have any issues with your plants being susceptible to disease or anything like that. All right. So moving on. Now, with supplies. So the most important thing, you wouldn't think it, but the most important thing with seed saving is labels. You need to label your plants when they're in the ground, if you have multiple varieties, so you know which one is which, so you don't get confused. When you take up your seeds and you're drying them, you need to have a label there. Yes, I can send you the link. You need to have a label there. Through the whole seed saving process, really, you want to make sure that a label is always going with the seeds until they get to their final place. And then also creativity is the biggest thing. So maybe when you're looking up seed saving, you may see people using some tools that you don't have. And when you look at them online, they're kind of expensive. You don't have to get that. People have been saving seeds for many, many years, and these expensive tools have not always existed. So some of the things that you can use, though, are seed screens. So these come in different sizes. Some of them come with a screen at the top and a salad at the bottom, so that you let the small size seeds through and all the rest of the stuff stays at the top on top of the screen. If you're rinsing seeds off, you can use the colander from home. I mean, a lot of us have these in our kitchens, and if you don't, they're pretty cheap at the Dollar Tree. Even sometimes use a smaller size one if I'm not doing a lot of seeds at one time. Labels, you know, you plant in the ground labels, however you want. Popsicle sticks, I find they're okay, but if you're going to use popsicle sticks, make sure it's a weather resistant marker, or maybe you want to go with a pencil, because they're wicking, so the moisture will follow up the popsicle stick, and then what you wrote on your popsicle stick will start running. It's not a good experience to know that you spent time labeling and then the label's gone. I also, when it comes to drying, sometimes I'll use paper plates. So I'll put the seeds on top of the plate and let them dry out, or on top of the bottom of the plate. That's just how I do it. Some people use paper towels, whatever's easiest. I've heard of people using like screens, window screens that they're no longer using, setting those up on lakes so that the air is able to pass through so that things can dry on that. But yeah, it's really whatever you can, if you can think of a use for something, it's more about function instead of what the name of the item is. And we're going to talk about storage a little later, so we're going to wait for that one. But now let's get into some seed saving. So with tomatoes are what you would consider a wet seed. So again, when you harvest your tomato to eat, it's the same time you're going to harvest it to save the seeds. When you cut open your tomato, you probably notice that there's kind of like a gelatinous thing around it, right? You want that to go away. You want it to end up looking like these seeds over here. So we're going to watch a process on how to do that. And just let me know once I start the video if you cannot hear the sound. All right.
No sound.
I'm not hearing anything.
Okay. Let me see. I might have to go in and actually share sound. There we go.
So now let's get into actually processing tomatoes. So all the wet seeded crops contain.
Can you hear now?
Yes.
Okay, perfect.
One more step then, or two more steps than a dry seeded crop. It entails separating the seed from the fleshy fruit, and then fermenting and decanting and then drying. So all of these, all seed processing for harvest season, you want to take the seed away from the plant matter. And this is just wet plant matter. So don't get confused. Don't think it's going to be too complicated. So I'm going to show you. It's very simple. You're going to want to have some type of clean cutting board, a nice sharp knife, especially for tomatoes. And then you're going to want a clean container like so. I like to use clear ones because I like to watch the process of fermentation that happens from the outside. So here we go. You harvested this. I'm going to make some sauce with it as well. And I'm just going to cut open the tomato. And let's see. It has different cavities, and so you might want to make a couple of slices. Here we are. We're going to squeeze the tomatoes out with our fingers. And this is home scale, if you will. So this takes some time. And you're going to squeeze as much juice in there as possible. That's a quarter of a tomato. You're going to keep doing that. You can save your tomato pieces for later, for processing into whatever your heart desires. And then you're going to keep going. So it's fairly simple. You're going to keep going until you have all your tomatoes processed and as much juice as you can in there. So if I processed all these, I'd probably get about that much juice. And then what I'm going to do is let it sit. Because what's going to happen is the sugars and the juice and the tomato seed are going to mix, and there's going to be a nice gentle mold that forms around the tomatoes and starts eating away the gel sac and the seed. And that is the most important part in terms of wet seeded crops, is to make sure that gel sac is eaten by mold. Natural mold that exists in our house, outside, that breaks the gel sac, and that allows the tomato seed to actually dry and not get moldy over storage. If you don't do the fermentation, some of your seeds will mold in storage, and you'll be very, very sad come the next season trying to plant them out. So what you do is you finish processing, and then you cover the top of your container. I have cheesecloth here covering it with. You can use a bandana, something that's not going to allow fruit flies or insects to get in. You want to make sure it stays clean. And then you're just going to let it sit for 2 to 4 days. And you can see here there's some mold here in the sides that has developed. You'll start seeing separated seeds. The heavy seed, once again, falls to the bottom. The lighter seed that didn't fully mature floats to the top. And you will stir it every day, because you want seeds that don't touch the mold to get touched by the mold so it can eat away those gel sacs. And then now I'm going to show you what to do day number 4, when all the mold has kind of touched every seed and you've stirred it every day, day number 4, then we have to finish the process of drying these seeds down. So the second to final step of processing this tomato is to decant it. That means using water to separate seed from other sediments. So within the tomato world, we're trying to separate all that fleshy, juicy, sugary stuff from the seed itself so that the seed can dry and stay preserved over time in storage. So we're going to use lukewarm water, and we're going to fill up this jar, and we're going to fill it up to the top, making sure nothing spills out. Give it a little swirl, and then we're going to let this heavier seed settle to the bottom and pour all of the cloudy water off. Now we're going to do that a couple times, and it's okay to pull off some of the seed that floats to the top, because that seed isn't going to be the really heavy, vigorous, well-matured seed. So don't be frightened if some of it goes to the water gods or the compost gods. It's okay. And we're going to fill it up, and we're going to do this like 3 to 4 times until the water runs clean. Once the water runs clean, then we're going to do a final fill and a final pour into a stainless steel or plastic colander that's very tightly knit to allow all the water to drain and to make sure our seed is fully rinsed and ready to be dried. And then once we do that, we're going to put the tomato seed on a surface that won't break off when the seed is dry, so something that's ceramic or stainless steel. Then I let it dry for 2 weeks in a dark, cool, well-aerated place. Don't put it in direct sun because that will cause degradation of the seed. Make sure you're putting it in a place that's shady in your house with good wind flow. And then
Okay.
and from there,
Sorry. I do just want to call attention to the cucumbers on that table. So I'm gonna have to get this out.
we'll make sure that I put the label in an airtight container or Ziploc bag and put in a cool spot for
right
storage.
here.
To finish,
So they're not green, they're yellow. So that's what I was talking about when we'll talk about when we get to cucumbers, but cucumbers you need to let mature way more than when you would want to eat them.
finish up this workshop.
And so the process for cucumbers is going to be similar to the process for tomatoes. You don't necessarily have to ferment cucumbers, but you do still want to make sure you get the gel that's around the seed off. So you would cut it in half, kind of like this one here. And if you notice by looking at the seeds on this one, the seeds aren't mature at all. And that's kind of what we like when we're eating a cucumber. You don't want to, I mean, most people don't really want to bite into hard seeds, but we need those seeds to mature in order to harvest them. All right. Now moving on to some other plants in the cucumber family, or in the same family that cucumber is in. So this slide is breaking down some species in the Cucurbita genus, right? So we're just gonna quickly go over what that's like. So we all remember, maybe we don't, kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species, right? So the important parts that we're going to focus on right now are family, genus, and species. So family are plants that are grouped based on similar structures. So maybe these plants are vining plants, which squash plants are. Genus is a maybe more selective or smaller group that commonly has similar flowers and seed structures. So if you look at squash, they usually have similar looking seeds. You kind of be hard to tell them apart if someone put pumpkin seeds, zucchini seeds, and any other squash, acorn squash seeds on the table and asked you to tell them apart, you may not be able to. A species is a group that can breed together. So not all squash can can cross-pollinate, and some can. So it's also not separated by winter and summer squash. Some winter and summer squash are in the same exact species. And then underneath species is usually variety. So within the same species, there may be varieties. So maybe if you look at petunias, there are lots of petunias with different colors, and those different colors usually have different variety names, but they're in the same species. So going back to the slide, we just talked about cucumbers. Now, cucumbers are in this same family, but if you notice, they have a different genus name. So having a different genus name automatically puts them in a completely different species. So if you really like cucumbers and you really like squash, you can grow those two next to each other. They will not cross-pollinate. Now, squash are they are insect pollinated. They do need to breed out with other plants, or they will not self-pollinate, mainly because their flowers, the male flower and the female flower, are on separate parts of the plant, meaning they don't have a perfect flower. And it's actually really interesting if you've ever gone outside to your garden and just sat there at your squash plants and just look at the bees going from flower to flower to flower. It really kind of illustrates why it's so easy for these to cross-pollinate from different varieties or within the species, because bees are just really happy. The insects that pollinate these flowers are just really happy, and they just are going to go to every flower they can. They don't care if that flower is not on the same plant or if it's not the same variety. Let's see. So with squash, again, winter and summer squash, the only difference really is that with summer squash, again, you would wait to harvest the seeds. So you want that summer squash to get big, you want the skin to get thick, kind of the same as what a winter squash would be. Winter squash, you don't really have to wait for that, because when we eat winter squash, the seeds are ready. Now, there is the recommendation that when you storing the winter squash and waiting to harvest the seeds actually helps the seeds to mature just a little bit more. But that's really up to you. And let's see. For the sake of time, we're gonna skip this video. But when it comes to harvesting seeds, squash seeds, you just wanna find a way to break the squash open. In this video, she's harvesting a really big squash, so she uses a method that you probably wouldn't use. But if it's huge, you can drop it on the ground, step on it, smash it. Normally you just probably would just cut it in half with a knife, scoop those seeds out. As you can see in this picture, the seeds are not a gelatinous coating, but they are covered in with the stringy stuff. So you want to get that off, wash it off. Sometimes I use the screen and kind of do like a scrubbing thing. It's up to you, whichever way works for you. You just want to make sure that that's not on the seeds anymore. And then you want to let those seeds dry. And you really want to make sure that they're dry before you store them.
So,
all right, moving on to legumes. So legumes are going to be beans, peas, lentils, things that you would think of as beans, soybeans. They normally have the pods are pretty green when we're eating them. So green peas, you don't harvest when they're mature. Green beans, you definitely don't harvest when they're mature. Drying beans, you do harvest when they're mature. So again, this is just a slide that's going over the Fabaceae family, so everything that's in there. Beans are self-pollinating, so it's unlikely that they could cross, but there is a small chance. I have heard of it happening. So if you're not able to isolate the species, only grow one type of that species. If you just really, really want to grow more than one in the same species, there are some things you can use like blossom bags or netting just to keep the insects out and make sure that that flower is pollinating itself and it's not getting any help from anyone else. All right. So now we're gonna watch this video, just short on how to save seeds from legumes.
Beans and peas in particular are great crops for beginner seed savers. They're fairly easy to grow. And if you're growing soup peas or dry beans, you're already familiar with growing plants to seed maturity. A little bit more on that later.
Oops, sorry.
Beans and peas are also inclined to self-pollinate as a result of their flower structure. Pictured here are a pair of pea flowers which look pretty darn similar to bean flowers. In the flower on the left, notice the two dark red wing petals. I've removed these petals from the flower on the right to expose a structure called the keel, which protects the reproductive organs of that flower from pollen and from pollinators. Notice the pistils and stamens after the keel is removed. It's most likely that pollination is going to occur between these organs hidden behind the keel. As primarily self-pollinated plants, beans and peas can be planted somewhat close to other beans and peas without much concern for cross-pollination and mixed-up seeds. Cross-pollination in the bean family can only occur between plants in the same species. So peas can pollinate other peas, but not cow
I'm just gonna skip
peas.
forward a little.
Limas can pollinate other limas, but not favas. For beans or peas, you can probably space different varieties within a species 10 feet apart for uncrossed seeds. Keep in mind, however, that the farther you can plant, different varieties are brittle. Pods might even start to split open at this point. If you can't dent the seeds with your fingernail, the pods are ready to pick off the vine. This is the time to harvest soup peas or dry beans for storage and eating as well. Less ideally, whole plants can be pulled up from the ground and hung upside down while the seeds finish maturing if the weather is particularly wet that fall. Once the pods and seeds have been picked, the next step is to separate the seeds from the pods and clean them of dirt and debris. Though this can be done by splitting the pods open by hand, threshing and winnowing can greatly speed the process. Threshing involves applying some amount of force to the pods to liberate the seeds. We like to stomp around on a pillowcase full of pods and seeds. The seeds will naturally settle to the bottom of the bag, or in this photo, the container we poured the seeds into, allowing you to remove most of the pods sitting on top. Winnowing uses an air current to blow pods and other chaff away from the seeds. Here we've set up a small fan on a chair and we're pouring seeds and chaff in front of the air current. The dense aerodynamic seeds are falling straight down while the lighter pods are being blown away. Start on a low fan speed. If chaff isn't being blown away, either crank up the fan or pour the bucket out a little closer to it. The process isn't perfect. Notice some seeds miss the bucket and there's a pod filled with seeds that's inside the bucket. But it only took about 5 minutes of threshing and winnowing to get seed that is quite clean. Alternatively, leaf blowers can be used to blow chaff away from threshed seeds in a wheelbarrow or on a tarp. Once the seeds have been cleaned of chaff, they may need to dry out of direct sunlight in a place with a bit of airflow. Seeds are dry enough for storage when a sample shatters rather than smushes under pressure. In this photo, we struck peas with a hammer. The seeds on the left shattered, while the seeds in the middle still had quite a bit of moisture, too much for winter storage. Peas and beans stored with too much moisture will likely mold before summer. Seeds should be stored somewhere cool, dry, and
Okay, so I know I skipped around a little bit, but basically you want to make sure before you harvest your beans, your peas, whatever, and the legume family that it is dry and crispy, right? It's better if you let it dry on the plant, but he did mention if maybe you have a frost coming, you can dig the whole plant up and hang it upside down. But you just want to make sure that it's dry and maybe has some pull. And then when you do take the beans out, most of us, I've never actually had to do like full, like that scale of threshing and winnowing, because really you just crack it open, and then I never have enough beans that I feel like it's a waste of my time to do it, and it can kind of be sort of soothing to have something repetitive to do for me. But it's up to you. If you want to try it out, it looks like a lot of fun to use the fan to help blow the seed pods and the rest of the chaff away. Okay, so now for the brassicas. Most of the brassicas are going to be biennials. The exception for that is broccoli. Broccoli, of course, what we eat is the flower head. So broccoli does flower in the first year. And you don't have to forego eating your broccoli in order to save the seeds. If you cut that main head off, there will be other flowers that grow through the sides. But all of these will cross-pollinate with each other, the brassicas. So the kale, collards, cabbage, mustard greens, Brussels sprouts. The way to get around that is maybe you don't save seeds from them all at the same time. So as long as you don't let them flower, don't let all of them flower, you won't have an issue. All right, so when it comes to the brassicas, they, well, most of them have these skinny seed pods called siliques or silkwas, however you choose to pronounce that. We're just gonna watch a video on an easy way to get those open and to save those seeds.
It's actually really easy to save kale seed. The tricky part is that in the far north, you have to save kale plants over the winter in a root cellar because it's a biennial plant that goes to seed the second year. In California, in the south, you just leave the kale in the garden, it goes to flower in the spring, and then you end up with these dry seeds about midsummer. And all you have to do to save kale seed is get yourself a nice bowl like this, and the pods are very brittle, so you just simply rub the seeds together. Then there's a bunch of chaff. The seed pods get taken out, and then what you have is all this seed in the bottom, and it's just that simple. You know, you simply take the pods out, and then you blow it like that, and you've got perfectly clean seed. Just that easy.
Okay, so yeah, it's pretty easy. The thing with those seed pods though is they will open by themselves. So you really do have to be watching them in order to not lose your seeds, and then have a whole bunch of kale, collard, broccoli volunteers next season because all your seeds fell on the ground in your garden. Radish is also in the Brassicaceae family, but it is not a brassica, so it will not cross-pollinate with the brassicas. And unlike the other plants that we just looked about, the seed pod for radishes is a little bit bigger. It can vary in size, but they're going to be a little thick like this. And the good thing is they do not open on their own. So radish seed pods, if you've never seen them, are delicious. Radish flowers are beautiful. That's why I chose to put radish flowers here instead of a radish, because I just really love them. And if you ever sit in your garden and just look at them, the insects really love them too. So that's a plus for letting your vegetables go to seed. It feeds the insects, you get some beneficials, they bring in some of the beneficial insects that are actual predators for the insects that attack your plants, and you'll get seeds. Radish seed pods, I would describe them as tasting like maybe a radishy green bean. And what you want to do is make sure you just don't eat them all. So that you'll have some to save seeds from. Again, they don't open on their own, so you do kind of have to crack them open. And then you'll see the seeds inside. It's a little too small for me to show you on camera, but they're really easy to crack open. They've kind of got like a foamy consistency once you do. And save the seeds, make sure that they're dry. So I like to set mine out on a paper plate after I crack all the pods open and just make sure for sure that they're dry before I put them in anything. All right. Now, the Asteraceae family includes sunflowers. It includes asters. And also it includes lettuce. So these are, they're self-fertile. So you don't need to have more than one plant. And they do have perfect flowers. The lettuce is an annual, but some of the life cycles vary. I can't think of one right now that's not an annual, sorry. But they're like, artichoke. Artichoke is a perennial, but some of them are annuals. So we're going to talk about lettuce. Lettuce is, it's an interesting plant. It grows very tall. It's different than when you're growing it to eat. The seeds kind of remind me of dandelion seeds, except they're it doesn't open, it just kind of sits in its little casing a little bit and then puffs open, but they will fly away. So like dandelion seeds, all they need is a wind and they will fly away. So you do want to make sure that you have a plan for that. The video that's here, we're not going to show, but she covered her lettuce plant in a net to keep the seeds in. And then she kind of just crunched the seeds off and cleaned them up. Lettuce seeds are very tiny, but for home use, you get the seeds as clean as you can. You don't really need to stress about it. The cleaner you can get them, the less likely that there's something in there that could be holding moisture. But don't stress yourself out. It's not as clean as it needs to be if you were actually selling the seeds. All right, and I did just want to mention something that you don't eat. So marigolds, very easy to save the seeds. Once the flower starts to die, you'll even see it sometimes. The sepals will pull back a little bit, and you'll see those seeds in there. So I meant to bring a marigold flower and I forgot, so I apologize. But you just pull off those dry flower petals, separate it from the seed, and then make sure everything is dry and label it and put it away. Now, I just want to, before we talk about storage, just give a chance if there's anyone who wants to bring up any plants or seeds that I didn't mention. It looks like someone did. So Louis says, if I want to save seeds from my fennel and I grow dill close by, will that be okay? And how far does fennel need to be away from the dill? So I can double check, but to my knowledge, fennel and dill will not cross-pollinate, but let me just double check for you. All right, fennel, yep, different species, different genus. So they're in the same family, but they don't have the same genus, so they won't cross-pollinate. You don't have to worry about planting them far away. Now, you may want to plant them in different places if you have some difficulty distinguishing between the two, but normally it's when you get up on them and you smell them, that shouldn't be an issue for you. Any more plants that I didn't bring up that anyone wanted to talk about? No? Okay.
What about watermelon or any type of melon?
Okay. Melons. Let's see. Melons, for the most part, I'm trying to remember if you eat those when they're all the way ripe or mature as well. I may have to get back to you on that. If you want, you can send me an email just so I can remember.
Okay, I will.
And I just popped my email address in the chat.
Okay.
Okay. All right, so now on to storage. So again, the most important thing with storage is to remember you want your seeds to be in a place that is cool. You want your seeds to be dry. You want their environment to be dry. And if you can help it, you want it to be dark. Now, really, really important is dry, because if there's any moisture, your seeds can germinate or they could mold, and we don't want that after we've gone through all the work of saving them. Also, cool, high temperatures really degrade the life of your seeds much faster than they would if they were just sitting there. And for storage, and for short-term storage, meaning like you're probably going to use these seeds within maybe 1, 2, 3 years. I like the paper envelopes, the ones that self-seal, and also I have some of these Ziploc bags. It's nice to be able to see, but for the most part, I like the paper envelopes because I don't have to buy a separate label. I can write directly on the envelope. So what you would want to write is the type of seed. So say here in this picture, we're talking about climbing French beans. They put the species on there and they said it was heirloom, so that's helpful. But another thing that you really, really want to do is say the date, the year that you saved them. And if you're saving things in different seasons, you may want to put the season too, but the year is really important. That will help you when you're going through your seed collection to say, hey, I should probably use these seeds because I saved them about 5 years ago. I need to check and make sure they still are good. And then, anything else. So maybe if you originally got the seeds, say from Baker's Creek, or you originally got them from Dollar Tree, which has seeds for 25 cents, if anyone doesn't want to spend a lot on seeds. That's nice to put where you originally got them. Any weird things that happened, so any weird growing conditions. And yeah, so you have a history about those seeds. Also, if this isn't the first time that you saved these seeds from your garden, it's nice to put which generation they are. So the first time you save the seeds and you grow them out, that would be the first generation. Just to kind of keep track of how well they're doing in your gardens. Let's see, what else about storage? For long-term, glass jars are really great. Oh, 10 cents. I've never seen the 10 cents a pack at Dollar Tree, but I did get excited about the 25 cents though. For long-term storage, mason jars are really great. I've heard of people using prescription pill bottles because they're good at keeping the light out. I know some of the vitamin bottles that are like glass, the tinted glass, those would be pretty great. And then if you have the ability, you can either refrigerate or freeze. Now, I don't do that because we used to have a lot of power outages, and what I didn't want was for the temperature to fluctuate frequently. You want that temperature to stay as consistent as possible. But if you're able to keep it at a consistent temperature, then freezing will will extend the life of your seeds, and refrigerating will be helpful as well. All right, so now we're gonna get into why would you even want to save seeds? So again, seeds can get pretty expensive collectively. Like when you're going through those catalogs, there's always something that you want. So saving your own seeds kind of saves you money. And again, with the saving seeds over and over, the plants have I would call it a genetic memory. So the more you save the seeds in your garden, the better adjusted the plants will be for your particular climate, and for that soil. And you're even be able to selectively save seeds. So say you had a really bad battle with blight on your tomatoes, but there's that one tomato that's still standing. You probably would want to save seeds from that one because it looks like it has a higher tolerance for that disease. If anyone else can think of their own personal reason why they would want to save seeds, you can feel free to pop it in the chat or come up on the microphone. And if not, that's fine. All right, so we're reaching the end. So any questions or comments that anyone wants to say? So any more questions about different types of seeds I didn't talk about? I know I didn't mention okra. In the South here, okra is pretty common. But anything y'all want to talk about?
Yeah, hi, this is Phyllis Reed. I do have a question. Do you, since you guys are recording these sessions, and I know we had a class a couple of days ago too, how can we see this? Is this on YouTube, or Eventbrite will send out a link to watch this again, or?
So yes, we'll be uploading them on YouTube. And I'll send out an email once each of these events, the fall gardening and this one, is on YouTube with the link, so that you'll know. So you don't have to look for it. I'll let you know.
Okay, do you guys have a channel or something?
Yes, we do. And there's actually a lot of programs on there from probably all of last year. So you should, if you want to see some more, you can definitely take a look. It's a lot of topics.
Okay, is this under the UGA or?
Clayton County Extension, I believe.
Okay, Clayton County. Okay, great. Okay, thank you. Oh, and then you're gonna also send us the links to for some of these sites?
Yes. And so actually for the Seed Savers guide, I can post that link right now.
Yeah.
And then
The phone number. I was like, it's the rough
Yeah.
draft.
Yeah, and I think I took that last sentence off.
all right.
Place that.
So Darlene says that she saves seeds to keep plants around that might disappear otherwise, and that's a good reason too. So if there's a variety that you really love, there's no guarantee that it's going to be in that seed catalog the next year. So if you want to save those seeds, you kind of, it's like insurance.
Next Monday, say.
All right.
September.
Any other questions or, well, let me scroll up, sorry.
Or do you
So when it comes to sunlight to dry out seeds, no, not really. Sunlight is a little stronger than what we think it is. So you kind of want to keep your seeds out of direct sunlight. If you have a nice place inside, or maybe you have a covered patio and it's not humid, which it normally is in Georgia. So you probably do better with having them inside, maybe, or in a basement, out of direct light, out of direct sunlight. Okay. So when you leave the Zoom, there should be a program evaluation that pops up. In that evaluation, if you would like to see any presentations or any programs on a topic that hasn't been covered, or even if it has, you just want to see it again, please feel free to include that in the program evaluation. We're doing our planning for next year now, so definitely want to keep in mind what people would like to learn. But that is all I have for today. So thank you again for coming. And I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.